It's 10:03, so let's go. Yes, good morning and welcome everyone. As I said previously, it's amazing to see so many people that's registered and been able to attend today. Distinguished Professor Jenny Pope, I love the distinguished bit, emphasis on the distinguished, is going to give you a tour of the FOREQUITY website and resources, and that's going to be followed by a Q&A session where if you can either add your questions to the chat, we'll be monitoring the chat, or raise your hands in the usual way. We're recording this session so that we can share it more widely. So obviously, if you don't wish to be seen, then please turn off your camera. Okay, let's go, Jenny.
Hi, thanks very much, Jane. Hi, and thank you all for turning up for this. As Jane says, I'm going to give you a tour if my internet holds. I'm up here in rural Cumbria, and it's a very windy, wet, dark day. So fingers crossed. A tour of the FOREQUITY web-based platform, and I can see Katerina is joining us here, who's been involved in developing it. I just want to give you a bit of a background to it, not very much. And I'm not going to take you through the whole of the platform. I'm just going to illustrate how you might navigate through it. Please don't try and read the text because it will be too small for you. That's not the purpose. The purpose is just the general overall structure. So as Jane says, I'm Jenny Pope. There are prizes for what you think I might be distinguished for. Actually, nobody's ever used that term before. I'm at Lancaster, and I'm a sociologist working in public health. And I do know from the names I can see, I know some people, not everybody. So FOREQUITY is building on the Health Inequalities Assessment Tool, which some of you might know. We affectionately refer to that as HIAT. And that was developed by Ana Porosh Escudero and I, with public partners and other researchers in the Clark Northwest Coast, actually in 2014. So it's been used in the Clark for a long time as part of a process of trying to integrate an equity lens into all of the work of the Clark. And now it's a key part of the ARC Northwest Coast mainstreaming strategy. But the aim of the HIAT and FOREQUITY is to support researchers and research teams, including public partners and practitioner partners, to think about how they can integrate an equity lens across their research, right? And we're not arguing here that everybody should do research on health inequalities. I'm presuming you all know what health inequalities are with this group. I'm not going to explain what I mean. So we're not arguing that everybody should do research on health inequalities. What we're arguing is that all health research, whatever the topic, should have an equity lens, so that it has the potential to contribute to action to reduce health inequalities. So it can be clinical research, it can be systematic reviews, it can be action research, whatever kind of research it is, whatever the topic is, not just in health, it should have an equity lens. So the problem with the HIAT was that it did have an equity lens, but it was very narrowly focused on socioeconomic status and social material determinants of health inequalities. Now, those remain core to the genesis of health inequalities. So, poor housing, low income, difficult living circumstances, all those kinds of things are absolutely core to the pathway to health inequalities. But we know that there are other dimensions that intersect with socioeconomic status. So gender, ethnicity, disability, sexuality, etc. And those intersections, so in particular the social processes associated with the categories like ethnicity, so racism, for example, sexism, are as important as the social material determinants. In fact, they intersect and they compound it. So we wanted to revise the HIAT so it was more sensitive to those intersections. And in doing that, it was an opportunity for us to extend the Hyatt, to make the platform more useful, to put other resources in. So that's what FOREQUITY is. It's now live. You can find it under FOREQUITY. I've forgotten it's just forequity.uk. And you'll probably find still lots of gremlins, links that aren't working. We're constantly trying to keep up to date. So there is a contact us page. And if you get in there and do find gremlins, please let us know so we can correct them. But it's up there now. People are using it, and we're getting really good feedback, constructive feedback about how it can be improved, and positive feedback. So the last thing to say is that the revision of the Hyatt into FOREQUITY, into this web-based platform, was a joint initiative of the NIHR Applied Research Collaboration Northwest Coast and the School of Public Health Research, where I am now located. So that's been really good as well, because the school is a bit behind ARC Northwest Coast in mainstreaming equity. So we're now beginning to use FOREQUITY to do that and to learn from ARC Northwest Coast experience. So let's go on the tour, fingers crossed about the technology. So I hope you can see that. I presume that Jane will shake her head or wave her hand. Yeah, okay, that's great. So this is the landing page. As you can see, it's got a very brief introduction to what are health inequalities. And then there's a carousel, which is not working at the moment. It is if you go online properly. But it just gives examples of intersectionality, really, of the way in which material circumstances interact with other social processes to generate health inequalities. And then here are the three main sections now of FOREQUITY. So there's I'll take you briefly into each of these. There's an inventory of other guides that we have found through a systematic review that are focused on supporting research to become more equity sensitive. There's the revised Health Inequalities Assessment Toolkit, and there's the FOREQUITY library resources. So let's go into the Hyatt first. Those of you who are familiar with the Hyatt will recognize that the first four sections are the same as the Hyatt sections. So you've got the first section is mapping health inequalities relevant to your research. The second, integrating an equity lens into your questions, into your research questions. If you don't do that, actually integrating it into the design and conduct of the study is much more difficult. And then issues around designing and conducting research sensitive to inequalities, prioritizing findings in dissemination. So those are the original, slightly tweaked titles, but they're the original Hyatt sections. But we've added a new section, Principles for Research that's sensitive to intersectional inequalities. And it's thinking about what are our responsibility as researchers and research institutions around social and health inequalities. So each of those first four sections there are divided into three subsections. The first is focusing on reflection. Now, important to emphasize, the Hyatt isn't a how to do it tool. It's a space. It's a space for people to think about how they are best able to integrate equity into their research. And to do that, ideally, with the team, with the research team, and particularly important with public partners, with relevant public partners and other stakeholders. But the Hyatt is designed around the idea that the best way to integrate equity is to do it with people with lived experience, who are the focus of your research. So each of these main subsections has got three parts: reflect, involve, and dive deeper. I knew that this was going to do this. Katrina's seen it do this several times, and it drives me bananas because the little gadget that will allow me to refocus it isn't working. So just before we go into one of these sections to show you how they're structured, I'll show you there is a as I said, this is being used in the Arc Northwest Coast as part of their mainstreaming strategy. And people are asked to keep some notes really on what they learn and think about as they go through the HIAT. So there is a downloadable note-taking form which anybody can use, but it has been designed to work for Arc Northwest Coast and for the School of Public Health. And you can get that in Word format as well. So let me just show you a couple of these sections. Just to, please don't try and read the words. Just to show you how it's structured. So if you go into any of these sections, you'll find some text that describes the purpose of the section, right? And then you'll see these 3 boxes: to reflect on the issues, to think about how you best involve people, particularly people with lived experience. And then if you want to, you can dive deeper into the issues that are raised, okay? So as I said, it is not a how-to tool. So in the reflection, you will get questions, just asking you to think about things. So here you've got thinking about the wider context for your study and the existing research on the topics. Just think about, are some groups in specific social categories differentially affected by the issues you plan to study? What factors may have caused that unequal experience? What is known or not known? These are all questions that researchers do routinely, but maybe not with an equity lens. That's the point. They may ask these questions: what do we know about research in this field? But they may not ask themselves, what do we know about the unequal distribution of the problem I wish to study? So it's each of the reflection sections have got a set of questions. They involve is set up in the same way. It's a set of questions. So who do you involve? How do you involve them? And what equity issues do people with lived experience and other expertise prioritize? So it's designed around a set of questions. Those of you who teach as well will recognize this pedagogic approach, really. So I'm not going to go into each of these, but I just was going to go into designing and conducting research to show you how we've also linked these, how we've also linked these questions to other resources. When I practiced this morning, it didn't do any of this leaping around. So going into reflect in terms of designing your study, you can see here there are a number of reflection questions. So they're obvious, really. But again, and you will think about it, what data do I need? But the issue here is, what data do you need to explore the equity dimensions of your research? And you can see that under these reflections, there are links. And some of those links take you to case studies in our library. So here, for example, you're going to one of the case studies on understanding intersectional disparities in sexual orientation and ethnicity in relation to research on the PAT tests. And some of them take you to outside resources. And I think these are all HIAT case studies. The second section is, what are the implications of your study design, integrating equity in your study design, if you're collecting new data, if you're doing a systematic review, or if you're looking at secondary data. And again, there are case studies in the HIAT library that will help you think about those questions. And similarly, the third reflection is, what analytical methods will you use if you want to explicitly look at differential impacts of an intervention, for example. And then involving, what we're trying to do here is get you to think about how public partners and other people can be involved in your research. Now, I know this is well developed in the ARCs, right? But it is not well developed in other areas, to actually think about what your public partners can contribute in relation to equity issues, right? So part of the lived experience is actually the lived experience of social injustice and health injustice. So you may have to think about approaching different public partners to make sure that you've got a perspective about inequalities in your team lived experience of inequalities rather than lived experience of, for example, diabetes or, for example, exercise. So again, these are not unfamiliar issues. What is not routinely done, and you're probably aware of that, is to address these issues through an intersectional equity lens. And then the final section of the original Hyatt's is dissemination. And actually, some of the reviewing that I've just been doing recently shows that public involvement in dissemination is still the weakest area of public involvement across health research. We're very, very good as academics in involving the public now in most aspects of the research process, but it's still quite underdeveloped in relation to dissemination. So in the dissemination section, in the involve part, for example, we're trying to get people to think creatively about how public partners might be involved in disseminating findings from research. And this link takes you to a whole series of graphic art booklets and videos that were produced actually as part of a Clark Northwest Coast program, where people are telling their stories about being involved in research. But these two booklets are also co-produced with public partners about the findings from a local action research. Okay, so let's just briefly go into the final one here, just to show you what this is about. Interestingly, there's increasing interest in this idea of what does it mean to be an equity sensitive researcher? And this section actually proposes 3 principles, which you may accept, you may challenge. We really would welcome some comments on them. The first is about researchers removing their implicit bias. And there's a link here to an interesting Harvard test, the association test, which is being developed to support research teams to think about the biases that they unintentionally bring to the issues that they're researching. So it's not a very attractive website, but it's a very interesting one. And then the second principle is to design research in ways that actually challenge inequalities. And that link takes you to the FOREQUITY inventory here, which has got a lot of other guides that are thinking about doing research on racism and ethnicity, doing research on sexuality and sexism, and to think about interesting ways in which your research can actually challenge some of those taken for granted issues. And then the third principle is how can research practices positively promote greater equity, both in the way the people we recruit to do research, the way we support researchers, the way we design our study. And there are some standards here. Some of them will be familiar to you. So the standards for public involvement that were developed by Involve when they were part of NIHR. There's work by the European Commission who's setting out some standards. And these 5 principles developed by the US research organization Child Trends, which are very interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting website, if that still works. There you go. So, you know, these resources are really, they're open access and they're really, really rich. This is very specifically focused on racial and ethnic equity in research. So very briefly, let's go to the other 2 parts of Hyatt, the library of the FOREQUITY. The library is divided into 2 sections. There are these Hyatt resources that I've been mentioning to you that are linked to the Hyatt, and they're organized under the Hyatt's 4 main sections. And if you go into any of these, some of the resources are duplicated because they're relevant to more than one of the sections. But if you go into these, you'll find summaries, case studies of research papers from researchers that have tried to integrate an equity lens in some way. And each of these, they summarize the research, basically. It summarizes the research and it will give you a link to the research. Hopefully the paper is open access but not all of them are. We've tried to focus on open access papers. And the other part of the library is just general resources. And we're deliberately here trying not to duplicate. So it's very much links to other websites, links to other resources, but there are a few references to papers that we think are particularly relevant to the issues raised on the FOREQUITY website. And there's this really engaging short video on intersectionality and health explained, produced by colleagues at Sheffield. If you don't know it, do have a look at it, because it's a really nicely produced, visually nicely produced, but also very, very well thought through explanation of what is considered generally to be a very complex concept. These are the sections of the FOREQUITY library. And you can just scroll down and see we're constantly adding to the library. So if people have any suggestions for papers that we can include in the Hyatt part as case studies, or that we should include in the general library, we really welcome those. So finally, the inventory. Let me just see. Sorry, I've got my computer. It's not that difficult to navigate through. It's me and my computer that are not great tools for that purpose. So here's the inventory. Just to say that the inventory has got 22 guides on it at the moment. It's very specifically focused on guides for research. So we know there are a lot of other toolkits and guides out there that are focused on developing equity sensitive policy, for example, like HEAT. These are all focused on supporting researchers to integrate an equity lens into their research. And we did a systematic review and we found these 22. We are adding to these, so if you think we've missed something, please do let us know. But remember, the criteria is that they're focused on supporting researchers. They are there's a search engine where you can filter. So for example, these are not all intersectional, but they are focused on different aspects of that intersectional framework. So say you're interested in how in particular you might strengthen a gender lens in your research and what guides there are. So then you'll get 3 here on this inventory. As I say, if you know of others, please do let us know. And these are all structured in the same way. So it's a standard template which gives you the reference for the guide. It summarizes very briefly what the guide is trying to do. It tells you whether the audience is only researchers, or some of them are for researchers and policymakers, or researchers and the public. It tells you how this guide might be used in the research process, what the focus on health equity is, whether it's theoretically framed or not, which seemed to be quite important when we were looking at these guides, whether there is ever any evidence of public involvement in the production of the guide. And interestingly, a lot of them didn't have any evidence that that was the case, and whether it's been evaluated or not. And then there's a link to the full text. So that's the standard way in which these are guides are presented. You can actually just enter a search term and search, but I can tell you that's very limited at the moment. So it's better to just use these broad categories up here. And as I say, if you know of any we're missing, please let us know. We are going to approach RDS East Midlands, which some of you presumably are linked to ask if we can include the new guide on equity, diversity and inclusion that's been produced by East Midlands RDS, which seems like it should absolutely be there. So that's FOREQUITY. I'm going to stop now. And thanks for listening. If anybody has any questions or comments at all, be pleased to answer, and Katrina might also be able to pick up any. Silence.
So Ganesh has put in the chat, Jenny, about wanting to include some of their work on racism in applied health research. Ganesh, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about that. Hi, I can see him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can indeed, Ganesh. Hello. Go for it.
You go on mute. Yeah, I'm in a public space, so yeah, I'll try to be quiet. We published around applied. We published around applied health research in the BMJ, which you probably could find useful. My earpiece has just fallen out, so it's not. I'm having a great time. Okay, I'll finish there.
Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
that's great, Ganesh, and I have the link. So thanks very much. But that's exactly the kind of help we need, really, is to identify more of the case study, more examples for the library, really. Thank you.
We might just need to mute. We might just need to mute you, Ganesh.
I can see somebody said that it's quite difficult to find online. Actually, I hadn't heard that before, but it is just simply FOREQUITY oneword.uk. So it should be relatively simple. It's a slightly funny story. When we were trying to think of an easy title for the web resource, Katrina and I were looking at handles for Twitter and things, and when I checked FOREQUITY, it was global finance institutions, of course. So we were trying to find a way of combining them, so you didn't get into venture capitalists, which is quite interesting websites, actually, the venture capitalist websites. But of course, equity has got that kind of quite important meaning in that world of finance. So very different meaning.
Yeah, we put the link in the chat. So if you just scroll up a little bit, it's there. So I've got a question from Naya Campbell. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Sorry, Naya. How have researchers generally found using the resource that has been developed? Naya, I don't know whether you wanted to come in and talk about that.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, because I myself am a public and patient involvement officer, and so we're often trying to work out ways to better enable researchers to conduct high quality PPI, but also we're also looking at how do we kind of get that information across effectively. So there's loads of different ideas we've got within the Art West Midlands, that's where I'm based, by the way, about how we might do that, because I think often it's about facilitating learning opportunities in the easiest possible way and most accessible way. So I just wondered if researchers that had used this were kind of reporting that it was taking a little bit too long to go through it, if it was really easy to go through it, and if those kind of case examples have been provided to try and break down any barriers, because I think often often the answer is there, but it's just a lot of effort, or there's a lot of reading that needs to take place, and that's why in some instances PPI leads are there to kind of provide that answer straight away. Sometimes we kind of say, oh, here's a resource, and then a researcher might look at it and go, well, why don't you just tell me what to do, rather than send me to this resource that I've got to read and spend half a day reading. So I was just wondering if I saw like there were some like question sheets that could be used to reflect, but then I'd imagine that people would have to engage the content to enable them to reflect, looking at it through this lens. So if there was any kind of understanding about how long it typically took to be able to engage with it meaningfully or engage with it from an informed perspective. So yeah, that was generally my question.
I think, oh no, Jenny's
I know
back.
Nia, I got, the minute you asked the question, I got kicked out. It must have been something psychological about the question. You see, when we used Hyatt, and Katrina's used it much more than I have now, but it wasn't a one-off event, right? We didn't expect people to go into that tool and sit down and use it all the way through, because it's actually linked to the research process, isn't it? So the way it's been designed is intended for people to use it as a resource throughout the research process. So if you're thinking about a new study, that first section on mapping the terrain and thinking about it is something that you would go in and use those questions to help you kind of think about doing that. And that indeed in the School of Public Health Research is how people have started to use it. And they're using those first two sections about setting up the questions, thinking about the terrain we want to do the research on, and setting up the research questions so that they're equity sensitive. Those are the two parts of the Hyatt they're working on at the moment. And then when they start designing their study, they'll move into the third one. So it's a process. It's just like the research is a process. So the Hyatt has been designed to help to be a support people through that process as they go through. So I think it's kind of will be difficult if somebody did sit down and try and go through the whole of the Hyatt at one go. I think they'd say there's too much in here. We can't do it. You know, it's overwhelming. And I think at the beginning, we do encourage people to use it in a more process-oriented way. The inventory, you can go in and tap into that at any time, can't you? You know, if you're doing research on racial disparities, racial inequalities, see, even that OHID language is so pernicious, isn't it? It gets into your head now. You could go in and to the inventory and see what resources are there to help. So and the library is the same. So I think those are kind of drop in and see if there's something useful. And the Hyatt is aimed to be a support for you as you go through the research journey, really. Is that reasonable, Katerina? Is that how reflects the way the Arc Northwest Coast is using it?
Yeah, I think it does, Jenny. And within the Arc, we also have processes where people get stuck with their Hyatt. They can escalate and try and get some support from colleagues who've also used it, try and get more people thinking, because no single person will always have all the answers. And we are developing materials where we're delivering training and workshops around it as well. And hopefully we can turn some of that into e-learning, or at least that's the plan for the next couple of years.
I think if I can add also is that when I've used it with teams of researchers, of clinicians or practitioners or commissioners and members of the public, we found it, I personally have found it a really useful tool to start the conversations, to see where our views differ as to what the issues are, and also to then start those discussions of, well, what do we need to know, what do we need to understand, so we can get that sort of common understanding of what we're trying to achieve in terms of action to reduce health inequality. So I've found it a really useful tool to start the conversations.
Suppose the other thing to emphasize is, as I said right at the beginning, it's not a how to do it. You know, it actually is trying to provide a space for people to think about how they can best do it, and to provide resources to help them think about that, show them how other people have done it, how other people have struggled with some of the issues, that kind of thing. So So as a space, you can use it in a whole range of different ways, I think.
And I guess, Jenny, if I may, the other thing to say that it's not meant to be a static document if you end up using the note form. It's meant to be a working document you keep going back to, because things will develop as you move on with your research. So as we've been saying so far, it's just about those discussion and revisiting and going back and what has changed, how can we improve things?
Yeah, absolutely. Which means we need the help of the ARCs and the RDSs and others to keep it populated, really, and keep it relevant, keep it interesting. So it's not that easy to find case studies of papers that have tried to integrate an equity lens, and most of the ones we've found have tended to be single dimensional, so socioeconomic or gender or racism and ethnicity, rather than intersectional. So any examples like the one that we got from Ganesh, really useful, very useful, and similarly other guides that you think might be included in the inventory.
That was such a great question. Thank you. Really opened up the discussion. I can't see any more in the chat, and I can't see that anybody's got a hand up or anything.
No, I can't.
So unless there's anything else that anybody wants to add, then I think we just thank you, Jenny, for taking us through.
Thanks for asking me.
As I said, this we've recorded it. We'll circulate the link for it, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to be putting it on our website as well. We've got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think the launch, which has got a lot more detail on how to navigate, is on your YouTube channel, and it's on the School of Public Health YouTube channel, and is maybe a bit more useful than this recording, actually. I mean, it doesn't matter having both, but that one was very specifically focused on taking people through the site, and we've also got public partners and others reflecting on their involvement in developing it with us. So the team that developed it included public partners. So you can find that on ArtNet Northwest Coast and SPHR's YouTube channels.
True, and in fact, I put that on the Eventbrite as well. And I can see that Carolyn has got hand up.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question, but then Jenny answered it, so I can take my hand down now. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks very much for asking me, and I hope some of you do get in and look at it and give us feedback. That would be great.